Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on how to cope with grief at Christmas. Like, Christmas is a really tough time for us parents and family members that have been bereaved, and it doesn't matter what time of year, how long ago it was, it is a really, really tough time. So my name is Nic Russell. I am the CEO and founder of Kenzie's Gift. I am also a bereaved mama. I lost Kenzie 16 years ago this Christmas to a Ewing sarcoma. She died of cancer tragically at the end of 2005. And she inspired Kenzie's Gift charity, where we support the mental health of young Kiwis and their whānau affected by serious illness or grief. So we will really get into this session today about how to navigate this really tough time of year for us all. And joining me today is our wonderful child and adolescent psychotherapist, Nicola Jackson. And Nicola Jackson specializes in helping infants and our tamariki and adolescents dealing with some of life's really tough stuff like this, and when they're really challenged with their emotions and feelings around it. And she's going to help us help our kids this Christmas and help our families navigate it. Nicola's master's was actually on infant sibling bereavement, which is an area very, very close to Nicola herself. So just before we get into you, Nicola, a little bit of admin stuff today. You can ask questions of both me and Nicola as we go through. If we can't get to all your questions today, please do drop us an email at hello@kenziesgift.com after the webinar, and we will definitely try to answer any questions or queries you have about this really tough time of year. So Nicola, over to you.
Tēnā koe, Nic. It's so good to be here. I'm a little bit nervous. This is the first webinar that I've done. So yeah, it's a very warm welcome to everybody. Tēnā koutou katoa. I can't see anyone. I can just see Nic, but I can feel your presence here. And I guess I wanted to reflect on the fact, or what brings us all together today, and that is that we've all lost somebody that we love, or we know someone who's lost someone that they love. And they're not here in the way that they might have been in the past. So I wanted to acknowledge those people and welcome them along, and I can feel their presence too. So I say haere mai to them and our tupuna and ancestors. I think also, Nic, what I wanted to acknowledge, and we talked about this previously, is this year we also are sitting with a collective loss that we've all experienced through the pandemic, and some of us may have lost loved ones through that, but many of us also are missing people who can't be with us and help us through times, really tough times that we might be having through grief. So I think that adds an extra level of complexity to our grief this Christmas. And also what brings us together is our love for mokopuna, and we're all here because we love a child or children, and I work with bereaved children, and they're a really special group of children. So I feel really honoured to work with them and to remember Kenzie also, who's the inspiration for Kenzie's Gift, and that's also something that brings us together. So looking forward to having this kōrero and conversation with you. I just wanted to say, yeah, even though I'm a psychotherapist and I work with whānau and bereaved children, I don't think that I'm an expert on this, and that people who have lived experience and parents and people who live with mokopuna and have relationships with them, they know them the best. So I hope this will create a space for thinking about children, but there's no one size fits all. Yeah, so to open our kōrero, I'd like to read a poem, and this is from a New Zealand poet of Tongan, Samoan and Pākehā descent. Her name is Carlo Mila, and the poem is called Your People Will Gather Around You, Love After Love. And I really like this poem because it talks about relationships and how they transcend time and space, and even after people have passed away. So I hope she doesn't mind, but I'm actually going to just take a little verse out of her poem and not read it, the full thing. But I encourage you to buy her book called The Goddess Muscle. Yes, your people will hold fast within you, in the marrow of your bones, waiting to be known. Traveling with you along the soft breathing curves of an infinite circle that has no circumference and whose centre is everywhere.
Well, it's a beautiful poem, Nicola, and it definitely speaks to, I think, all of us that are carrying our grief with us throughout life and our loved ones, and it really speaks to their spirit and their legacy that's with us. And I thank you so much for that beautiful opening. It's yeah, it really touched me. It was lovely. And I think, you know, for us all going into this time of year, you know, where Christmas traditionally has been a time where we celebrate families, isn't it? And I think that's what makes it really challenging. It's not, you know, the fact that we celebrate families, but it's the excitement that builds with presents and Santa and the parties and the get-togethers. And for us, you know, that carefreeness of Christmas has gone. There's that missing chair at the table, that missing piece that will be with us forever. And how do we navigate it? And also then for people, for our family and our whānau to understand what we're going through and for them to get it. And it doesn't matter, you know, if you've lost your loved one this year, 5 years, 10 years, 16 years, 30 years, it is always there. And I think how we learn to navigate it, and it is all an individual journey for us. I mean, how I did it suits me and it suited how I cope. But we've all got to tailor. So there's no right answer to any of this, is there, Nicola? We can't fix it. It's a friend of mine lost her son this year. My default is I want to fix it, but I can't. And I know Christmas is going to be tough and I want to fix it, but we can't. But what we can do is, as you said, recognize how we can help our mokopuna and our children and us as whānau, how we can navigate. And I think the first thing that really works, I think, is actually having a plan and have conversation, you know, because if we stick our heads in the sand, it's going to be really tough if we don't actually have an idea of how we're going to mitigate it, sometimes those issues that we'll have. So, Nicola, what do you think, like for this, we're supposed to be talking about this being the first Christmas for people, you know, where it can be really tough. What are some of the things that we can actually do to prepare our mokopuna and ourselves for that first Christmas without our treasured loved one?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up, Nick, on what you were saying about wanting to take the pain away and to fix it for our children. And I think that's behind that can drive a feeling that we need to do things and that we need to have a list of things that we need to do to make it all okay and to take the pain away. And it's really hard to sit back and know that we can't, and that our job as parents and as therapists actually, and people in children's lives, is to be with them through their grief and to walk along them through a really hard journey. And it's not so much our job to fix it. And it kind of goes against what we might feel, what we want to do. And so, yeah, what can we do to prepare? I get asked that a lot. And I like to reframe it and think about how do we be with our grief? How do we help our children be with their grief? And what we know about kids is if they can grieve with somebody and alongside someone and be observed and thought about in their grief, then that's how they develop their internal capacity to deal with these really hard feelings. And so the key to keep in mind as we go forwards, moving into Christmas, is that, well, there's three key things. First of all, relationship. Secondly, observing and thinking about the children. And thirdly, letting them do things at their own pace. And so what I would suggest leading into the Christmas period is being with the children. So having 10 minutes every day where you put everything aside and have no expectation about what's going to happen, and to ask the children to lead you and ask them what they want to do with you. And so you're not teaching or directing or solving or being a therapist or anything. You're just being with them and letting them lead you through whatever play they might want to do with you. And for some parents, it can be quite hard. And parents say to me, oh, I can't play, or I don't know how to play. And that's okay. You can what works for some parents is just describe what the children are doing, and oh, you're playing with the tea set, you're giving me a cup of tea, or without directing them. And sometimes something simple like reading a book is what parents feel that they can cope with. And we've got some books, I think, that we're going to suggest as well a bit later. Yeah. And also starting conversations with children and being open with them. Like, for example, this Christmas might be different this year without dad or your sister or brother or whoever's missing. And I'm feeling a lot of mixed feelings about that. Sometimes I feel sad, sometimes I feel angry. How might you be feeling? Or how do you want to spend Christmas? Or let's start thinking about this together and talking about this together. And also, as you're saying, having a plan can be really, really helpful, because we don't know what's going to happen on Christmas Day, if that's the day that is important for your family. And perhaps having some conversations with extended family members around that. A lot of people find it difficult to commit to plans. So you could say something like, if someone asks you around and wants you to commit to things, you could say, oh, right now it sounds like a really good idea to come to your house on Christmas Day, but I'm going to need to decide on the day. I'm going to need to have the flexibility to go with what I'm feeling or what the children are feeling. So if you need an answer right now, I can't give it to you and the answer will be no. But if you can let me decide on the day, then that would be good, and I'll let you know on the day. So yeah, just starting the conversations, and keep in mind that kids might want a bit of time off from their grief, and they might just want to have a normal Christmas and not talk about or think about their loved one at all, and that's okay too.
Those are really good points, Nicola, and really, as you said, engaging with the children and asking them, what they would like to do. I mean, I think that's always so important, because then they feel they're being respected and they're part of the decision making. And actually, it reminds me of a story about a friend of mine whose hubby died quite unexpectedly, and their tradition had been Dad and the girls would always go each year and get the Christmas tree and decorate the tree. So Mum thought, look, the girls will find that too hard this year. I'll go and get the tree myself. So she went and got the tree, brought it home, and decorated it. So the time the kids came home from school, the tree was up, bought, and everything. They were so distraught, because they still wanted that part, to do that thing, because it was so important to them. They wanted to do it with Mum. So they learned from that. So every year from that point, it was Mum and the girls all went together to choose the tree, because that was what they continued on as their new tradition, family tradition, without Dad. But it was a way they kept Dad's memory alive, because that was his thing and that was really important to him. So I think that's, that just shows you how important it is for kids and their feelings, because sometimes, as you've mentioned there, Nicola, as well, they can have strong feelings about it. And these girls, Mum was just, she couldn't believe how upset they got, and she wasn't expecting it. And I suppose that is the thing, like on Christmas, on a normal Christmas, without grief happening in the family, kids can get overexcited, they can get tired, their behaviour can be quite bad, and then they get punished because they need time out. It can be slightly heightened for them, under these circumstances as well, Nicola. So how can we actually help our children regulate those emotions that might be quite strong, that actually might be coming from a place of grief, not just tiredness and other things bubbling under the surface that they haven't been able to quite communicate to us?
Yes, it's so hard, isn't it? Because the children often will act out or show us how they're feeling, and it can be really intense feelings and really intense behaviour, and behaviour that we have quite strong reactions to ourselves. Yeah. Especially if we're feeling like they need to behave in a certain way. We might be at someone's house, for example, and we might feel embarrassed about how they're behaving. And yeah, I guess it's like I came back to before, it's about relationships and observing them, and creating a space for them to communicate with us. And sometimes children can't use words, especially younger children. So they do show us how they're feeling with how they act. And so it's helpful to think of behaviour as a communication, and also to give them the message that, and we can talk about this prior to Christmas as well, that we don't know how anyone's going to be feeling on Christmas Day or for the Christmas season. And we all might have times where we feel angry or sad or excited or jealous. And so you can give them the message that you're going to work with them together. You'll manage it together and whatever happens. And then they can feel like they've been thought about and supported in their grief. Yeah. And so what...
And that's a good point. Nicola, and the thing is sometimes just is having that, when they've played up and they've got upset, it's sometimes just sitting quietly with an arm around a shoulder and letting them, and it might not even be you might nominate a family member to actually, be that person, with them, to just, let them know, hey, it's okay, I've got you. It's and knowing that somebody's got their back, because sometimes kids do need that other person in the family as well, because I think as well as parents, when we're struggling with our own grief, it is really hard to hold ourselves together and manage the children as well. You know what I mean? And sometimes we need to, let our close family members know, look, you might be struggling that day and you need somebody to look out for, your little one as well, to help you navigate that, because you're struggling to do it on your own.
That's a really good idea, Nic. I think thinking about that in advance. So if you think, so you have a plan for the unexpected, someone can come in and be with the children if you can't, and being aware of, as much as you can, how you're feeling in the moment can be really helpful with helping your children regulate their feelings as well, and demonstrating that to them by taking time out and having a plan for what would happen if you need to go away for some time, and who would step in and look after the kids, and having that conversation in advance can be really helpful.
Yeah, because the thing it is also letting children know, our emotions are fluid, because if you have a day, and I've had it as well, where, something's triggered me in Christmas Day, everything's going fine, and then something's just triggered it, and I've had to step out of the room and take a moment. And fortunately, I've had really wonderful friends who would actually come and knock on the door and say, Nic, would you like me to come sit with you, or do you want some time just to yourself? And they've been cognizant of it. So sometimes I want them to come and sit with me, or sometimes I've said, look, I'll be out in a couple of minutes. But then the children also see that you're modeling behavior to help them regulate their emotions, because children are continuing to grow and develop, and this is something they will live with. This isn't just one Christmas, it is Christmases moving forward, and they will evolve and adapt as they go through as well, and how they deal with Christmas and what memories and sort of traditions they take forward. But if you have modeled, well, actually I can be sad in one moment, but I can also be happy. I can also enjoy. It doesn't mean it's not black and white. It doesn't mean it's going to be awful, but I might have a moment and I'm sad because of this moment, but a few 10 minutes, half an hour later, I can rejoin the festivities again and actually enjoy it and not feel guilty. You don't have to feel guilty about being happy, which is something that lots of us do feel when we first experience grief, is whenever we start to feel happy, we feel guilty because we're feeling happy, that we should be sad because we're missing our loved ones. So then you get into that juxtaposition and complicated side of things as well.
Yeah, Nic, so we've talked a lot about reaching out to family members and friends and having a bit of a plan. But what other advice would you have to people who are supporting bereaved adults? What sort of things might be helpful for them to say?
Well, that's a good question, Nicola, because over the years, many friends have actually come to me who's there's been a sudden death and somebody has lost a child or their partner and they've got children in the family. And again, they want to fix it. Their default is, how could we fix it? And it's like, well, I think it's about recognizing the loss and saying, and it's, I think the ones I liked, it's like what I said when my friend came up to say it, saying that I know this is going to be a tough time for you. I'm here for you. If you want a shoulder, I'm here to listen. If you'd like to share stories, if you'd like to talk about Kenzie, or if you don't, whatever rules for you, I'm here and I'll be guided by you. So they're open. It's not them talking and talking. It's there actually listening to what I need and recognizing that. And I can say to them, well, thanks for asking. Like you mentioned, Nicola, I might come if I'm feeling up for it on that day. I'm really looking forward to the invite, but I might not be able to. I might not come, and they don't get offended, because then sometimes when you stop accepting invites, people stop asking. But it's for people not to stop asking, to keep asking, because there will come a time when that person wants the invite. And you know what I mean? And I think also that what I also think people should do is not ignore the elephant in the room. My friends that I found most helpful was if I turned up for Christmas, they would have had a candle, and they would have said, Nic, that's Kenzie's candle for her today, so she's here with us. Or they'd put an angel in the tree, and they'd say, look, Nic, we'll put an angel in the tree, she's part of it. Or some of them knew what her favorite, lollies were, and they would have the lollies out. It's these simple gestures that they had that recognized it wasn't overt, it was a little nod, so it was gently done. And if the conversations, peaked where they would mention Kenzie, I said, oh, I had a lovely, I was remembering when she did X, Y, and Z. And I actually quite enjoyed that because I wanted to talk, and I quite like talking. And Connor loved hearing about his sister as well. So he was never excluded. It wasn't all framed around Kenzie, but it was just a nice way of acknowledging the person that's not there, need that be your child that you've lost, or your partner, or your family member. It's navigating it, but acknowledging, and that because they were here, and their presence was felt, and they'll always be here. Even if, as said Nicola, sometimes I think once the first year's done, people forget and think it's all done, it's all over now. But it's not for us. And I think I still have a friend that brings me a candle on her birthday and every Christmas. That speaks volumes to me. It's a simple gesture, and I think that's what people can do, is acknowledge it. It doesn't have to be big, and just say they're there for them. Don't let the elephant go in the room. Bring it up. If they want to talk, they'll talk. If they don't, they don't. And do something that just acknowledges their presence. I think that's really what I found really, really helpful. So for friends and family, that's what I would do. But I think the other thing, Nicola, I think we talked about just before we came on, is some of my family members, because this just didn't happen to me. It happened to Connor, and also my parents and extended family. And how we all deal with it is different. My parents didn't like to talk about it and didn't like to bring it up. But if we were all together, I needed somebody to bridge that gulf, because I always liked to acknowledge her presence. So my brother was very good at navigating that. He knew how to manage it and go, well, actually, this is what Nic needs on Christmas. This is what we can do to be with her. And this is how we can manage, with you. Are you okay with that? And have that preemptive thing before the day itself, because it can be quite complicated for families, because it isn't just the immediacy. And sometimes we can get upset that a family member doesn't talk about them or doesn't recognize them, but it's understanding also where they're coming from. And again, it's about the communication, isn't it? And you might have some advice on that, Nicola, as a therapist, for how you can manage those sort of sometimes tricky relationships at hard times like this.
Yeah, I was just going to say what you were saying about the elephant in the room and acknowledging that the person existed. The same is for children. And I think people step back from talking about children's loss because they feel they don't want to upset children, or they don't want to remind them, or they're not sure what the message should be. They want to sort of work through the adult first. But I would encourage people to do, as you said, for adults, to bring up the name of the person the child's lost, not in a really heavy way, but just a way to say, acknowledge, oh, they existed and you might be thinking about them today, or just to have their favorite lollies, or just acknowledge to the child. And even years after the child's lost someone, you can still bring it up, and I think that the children will welcome that, and so will the family. And if you want to, you could talk to the adults in the family beforehand about whether it's okay to bring it up. But I think the children, if you go with their lead, if they take on to your offer of talking about their lost person, then you can have a conversation. But if they divert onto something else, then they don't want to talk about it. But at least you're giving them the opportunity, and you've created space to do that.
And I think that is a really important thing, isn't it? It's giving them the opportunity and not shutting them out. And they feel really, and they feel in you've got their back, and that it helps them process their grief. And it's not something that, as I said, can be, I think, awful for their whole lives. It's something that can be celebrated and acknowledged, and it helps them create those memories, because they will continue to grow up and they don't want to lose the memories of their sibling or the parent that's died. You know, they want to have that ability to be able to keep their memory alive within them for their lives as they go forward as well. And I suppose, like, talking about Christmas traditions, Nicola, and memories, like, what can families do, you know, to help create memories about their loved one around Christmas? Is there some nice traditions that they can get into doing?
Yes, there are lots of nice traditions, and I really encourage people to have a think about them. We talk about in psychotherapy, or lots of places, I guess, about symbols, and children use symbols a lot. They use it in their play, and that's why symbols are a way for us to process emotions without necessarily having to talk about them. Sometimes, you know, they say pictures or poetry or songs can really say something that words can't. And that's kind of what symbols do. And symbols are a connection with a person that can feel like, or remind us that that person is very close to us, and that the relationship still exists, even though that person might not be with us in a physical sense. And symbols can take the form of lots of different things. So whenua, going back to your land or a special place. Kai, so having food that someone really likes, or traditional food. Waiata, Christmas decorations. You've probably got some more to add, Nic, that you can think of.
Yeah, I think it's some of the things that, you know, families that, you know, I've had the privilege of meeting through this time has been like, one of them was, you know, their new tradition was, like, their little one, you know, really had a favorite cake that they liked at Christmas. They couldn't stand Christmas cake, so then they got into, you know, making their own. I think they like, might have been banana cake, might have been their favorite one, so they got into, so every year they made banana cake because that was their brother's favorite cake. And I think for others it's sometimes it's symbols. For us, like for Connor and myself, like, because Kenzie was forever 3, like, he was 6 whenever she died, but it's like we would go up, you know, to the grave at Christmas, you know, and bring her a dolly, because he always was very concerned that Santa wouldn't miss out on Kenzie. This is when he was little, so that she still got her Christmas present. So he was, and that was driven by Connor, you know what I mean? So that was what he wanted, to make sure that she still got a Christmas present, even though she was in heaven, you know, in his mind's eye. And this is something we've still carried through, you know, it's, even though she would be 19 now, you know, that was very important for us. And some other things that families have gotten involved in, that kids like, was doing memory boxes. And also sometimes it was even life stories. So they created lovely memory books, photo books, because it was a chance then to bring, you know, their favorite photos in, and their favorite activities and memories that they had of their sibling or their parents. And some of them did, you know, video montages as well, that then was brought together and that family members all contributed to. And it was something then that these became, like, the memory box could be added to over time. That the photo book or a video is something that they oftentimes went to. Like, Connor would often go back to take out Kenzie's book, for example, and flick through it, even now that he's 21, in a moment where he just felt that he wanted to connect. And that could be any time, anything could trigger that time at all. But it's the same with the video. If you just want that quiet time to reminisce and feel you're connected to them, it's there. So I mean, those were really we found really good activities that families have really found beneficial, you know, with kiddies. And another one that a friend of mine started doing, like, just shortly after their partner died, was the kiddies every year they get into the tradition of making a decoration for the Christmas tree. And now the girls are now 21, so as they've grown older, every year they made a different decoration, and how they were feeling at the time. They were never the same, they were all different, but they've kept the box of decorations. But now the girls are, like, they're hoping that they will pass it on to their own children. They will carry it on, because it's a chance for them to storytell again about the memory of their loved one. So their memory lives on through the generations that they were, even if they lost their brother or sister when they were quite young. it was always a beautiful way to carry that memory forward. They were part of the family and they're still with this family. They were still here. And I thought that it's a lovely, tangible way. And it's also for the girls that they can look through their childhood and how they've evolved and how they've, how their memory and how they've told their story and created the legacy of their sibling. And I thought that was really special. And I thought that was really, really lovely thing to do with children. The other thing that family friends have done as well is create a stocking that they'd hang every year. And their house is quite open at Christmas, where whānau and stuff would come and go over Christmas. Quite a busy household. They did more of a traditional Christmas than I did. And they would always invite people to write a message every year and put it in the stocking. And they would take those messages out and read them together as a family. You know what I mean? Because there's always, and somebody that they might not have seen for 5 years, but they had a chance to write their message and they've kept those messages. And it's again something in their box that they've kept that they can take out whenever they feel to. They just want a time to connect with them. So these are things that you can future-proof, you know what I mean, that are really lovely to carry forward when you're, because we all have times, no matter how long ago our loved ones died, to be able to connect with them. I mean, and so will Connor bring out Kenzie's box of clothes or her toys, or just sometimes when you want to have a moment of reflection with them and your own history and where you are in the world. And also I think some of them normal things they would do is you would have maybe, just reflections with family members. You could bring up a conversation. So what was their favorite thing that they did? What was the most embarrassing thing they did? What was the silliest thing they did? And, it all depends on the age and stage of, was it a child that died or was it being a parent that's died? And so the stories will be slightly different, but it's all about the conversation and creating those memories and those legacies moving forward. And these were some lovely, lovely things that people have shared with me, that some things I've adopted as well. And as I said, because children do get older, and like Connor's now 21, and like he even said like last night, he's creating his own traditions now. He does like doing Christmas with friends, but he does reflect that our Christmases were different. You know what I mean? Because I struggle, but we still try to create a Christmas for him that was part of Kenzie. And we didn't have a big fan out here because I'm from overseas. My ex-husband was a Kiwi, so we didn't have extended family history. We didn't have the big family thing, so our Christmases were slightly different. But he enjoys big family get-togethers with others. He actually really likes that because it's something he slightly missed out on. And there's one thing I do want to bring up, Nicola, and I'll get your advice on this. It's for families that, a bit like mine, that were single-headed families. So every second year, I didn't have Connor. So this would be for parents that have lost a child, I suppose more so. And they find themselves on a Christmas without any of their children. So some families would have lost their only child, but for me, I lost one child and then had a surviving child. So every second Christmas, that got really tough to manage. So that was really hard to navigate. And you might have some advice for parents in a similar situation, because quite a few families do end up separating under the magnitude of a significant loss like this. For me, because of the way I was an adventure sport person. I used to go away and do, I had to be busy, go away and do a road trip with a friend. And my favorite recollection is actually one Christmas where we went mountain biking in the redwoods, and I felt such connection to Kenzie, with her at that point. And we actually had a pie and a Coke at the Blue Lake and rode through it, and it was magical. I still remember it was the first special Christmas. So I still had a good Christmas, but it was how I did it, so you still can have a nice time. But you might have some suggestions, Nicola, for families that are in a similar position where it is a shared custody thing, and that they might be without their children at certain times. Be any?
Yeah, no, it's not uncommon for parents to separate after a child passes away. And yeah, when you were speaking, Nic, I just thought how lovely to feel the presence of Kenzie in the woods.
Yeah.
And how we can connect with people in such different ways. And I think the environment and being in nature is a lovely way to connect with people who've passed on, because they are, well, I feel, it depends how you feel. And I think that's the thing. You go with don't be afraid to go with to get in touch with how you're feeling, and to go with what you want to do, and to not have a traditional Christmas if it doesn't feel right for you. Like there's no obligation to do Christmas if it's not going to work for you. And but then likewise, if you want to have Christmas with all the trimmings, and you would like to do that and be preoccupied with all the stuff that comes with that, then do that. And it's sort of, it's just no one thing fits everybody.
And I think that's very true, Nicola. I think, everybody, as the thing is, we started off this conversation by saying that I think we all want the answer to how to cope with Christmas. We want to be able to fix it because we know it's tough. And sometimes the lead up can be harder for us all. But it's knowing that, these are some tools and advice and suggestions to help us understand our grief and how we're feeling, how our mokopuna are feeling, how we can, manage it, to get through it, and not feel guilty if you're enjoying it, but, ways the way we actually can enjoy it and create a lovely legacy and memory for our loved one that's not with us. And I think that's really important. And as you said, what's right for each family, we've got to tailor it and do what's right for you, and don't feel selfish. I mean, that was where, I used to beat myself up about, gosh, am I feeling selfish because I don't want to? Don't feel selfish, because it is all about you. It's all about how you feel and your children and what is going to work for you, and don't apologize for it, and just hold steadfast. Because I've never apologized, and that was something I had to learn, and grief taught me, because I had to look after myself and Connor and get us through and create a good future for both of us in a way that would not be torn apart by the grief we all felt. And it is a hard thing. And I think as life has continued to move forward, like my life has definitely, grown around my grief. And because grief has never gone away, and I think we can say that for most of us, it never goes for us that are living with it. And, a friend asked me recently, who'd recently lost I think I mentioned them earlier. And it was like, I think when it first happens to you, it's like an acute illness that is so overwhelming and so raw. And if this is your first Christmas, it may be really tough. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say it's going to be anything other than really, really tough. But it might not be. But in that acute phase, it can be really overwhelming. And I think then what happens with grief, it tends to evolve into more of a chronic condition where it's always there. It's always under the surface. And sometimes you'll get a trigger, and it could be at Christmas, it could be any time of the year, where you just get overwhelmed again and brought to your knees by it. And you need to take stock, not be afraid to take time, to take that time to yourself, to reconnect, to center yourself. And whenever you're feeling okay, you begin to move forward again. But I think that's it, where you want family and friends to know it never goes away. And it is like living with a chronic condition, and your life goes around your grief and doesn't go away. And I think that's really a message more for family and extended, friends who are trying to understand it and how they can, support it. And you may have other thoughts on that, Nicola, before we sort of,
I was just going to add, don't underestimate the emotional work involved in supporting a grieving child.
Yeah.
And so you're doing your own grieving, but you're also grieving alongside a child. And that's, you need to think about looking after yourself. And I know that's sort of something that everyone says, but it's hard work being with a child who's grieving, and it can be really intense. And so getting the help that you need, in whatever form that may be, if you can't do it for yourself, because I have a lot of parents I work with who are really, really busy, and I would encourage you to make the time for your children, if you can't do it for yourself, to make sure that you are as well supported as you can be.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really good advice. Like, and if family and friends can be that for them, so they can, so they can carry the load as well, and then you can be with your child, to help them through this really, this really, tough time. And it's that's so important. And I don't know where I would have been without the support of, I had a wonderful therapist at the time, but helped me support Connor and his grief. So we still had good Christmases and recognized whenever he needed, mummy as well. And it's, and I had, family looking after me. So then I had the energy to be there for him. And be able to tap into the resources that helped me parent him really well and understand what he was going through whenever I had concerns. I think that's the wonderful thing about having amazing therapists like you available to Kenzie's gift clients, that you are there, that you can offer that advice and support, to get families through. I mean, it's just such an invaluable thing. And we can't thank you enough for the amazing work you do with families. And Nicola, it's phenomenal.
Thank you. It's a real privilege to work with families, and sometimes yeah, we can provide a space that parents just can't at that certain point in time. And I know I work with a lot of families who feel guilty, and that's a really common experience as well, to feel guilty that they can't take away the pain, or they can't be there in the way they think they should be for their kids. But I think, yeah, children really love their close adults and love spending time with them. So sometimes, while I don't like to invalidate the guilt feeling because it's there, I don't see the same. Yeah, feeling guilty can sometimes be something that can be put to the side, and you can focus on being with your child without worrying about feeling guilty if you can.
Yeah. Well, look, Nicola, thank you so much. I mean, it's been really, insightful. And I think, we will, as I said, we are recording this webinar, and we will have it up on the website with some more, tips and advice on how to navigate Christmas, with your whānau. And we'll also have some book suggestions. Nicola, before we go, do you have any book suggestions that came this spring to mind that you want to mention on the webinar, or will we just add the list in?
I do have this really lovely one, but yeah, I haven't checked whether it's in the library or anything, but I love That's Me Loving You by Amy Cross Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a poem to finish too.
Yeah, I would love to hear the poem. I think it's a nice well, yeah.
I'm going back to Your People Will Gather Round You, Love After Love, because I do love how it speaks to we are our people, however you wish to define who your people are.
Yeah.
And our people are us. And this is actually the beginning of the poem that I read before, by Carlo Mela. Your people will gather around you, your family who prepared a place for you in a lineage that connects you all the way back to the beginning, a family that dreamed you possible. It is their soft singing, cellular love songs, the chanting lyric of bloodlines, accompanying you all the way through the lonely.
That's lovely, Nicola. That's such a beautiful way to finish this off, in recognition of all of our loved ones who are no longer with us and we're carrying so close to our hearts. It's amazing. So thank you so much for a beautiful, beautiful poem and finishing it off in such a beautiful way. Okay, well, I think that's it all for today. So look, everyone, we do hope you do have a nice time with family this year, as well as you can on Christmas, and our hearts and thoughts are with you all, and love to all of you. And thank you so much for joining us on this webinar on this Thursday afternoon. And thank you so much, Nicola, for everything once again.
Thank you, Nic.
All right, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.